So I've watched our last video several times, just trying to get pretty much any information, as much information as I can squeeze out of it, and it pretty much left me with more questions. Not in regards to the type thing, just in regards to INTJ and whatnot. So I'm new to the typology thing. Like I've been kind of getting into it deeply for the last maybe 3 4 months. So it's still a lot I don't know. But I had always seen that they compare the INTJ and the INTP. But after our interview and kind of going over it, that is not the comparison I would make. I would say more the INTJ and the ENTP. And it just seems like there's more common ground there.
Well, the thing is, the reason there might seem like more common ground is because INTPs countervalue your dominant function. It's their demonstrative function. And you countervalue their demonstrative, their dominant function, TI. So the thing is, you find it appropriate that I use TI the way I do, which is as a tool function, instrumentally. It's not an end in itself. It's a purposeful kind of deliberation in order to attain something that is NI resonant. Whereas with INTPs, NI is countervalued because it constrains their ability to TI out all the possibilities. And so they don't really like final conclusions. But you and I like each other's dominant function. You value inherently the way I use extroverted intuition, and you think INTPs use it too much. I value inherently the way you use introverted intuition, and INTPs think you use it too much, I guess, or they think that it shouldn't be an absolute value. That's where they disagree, you know. But also, I would say that the reason those two are compared a lot is because they do tend to typically be the two smartest types. Azura Sykes been talking about IQ tests with me and stuff. And the point I would make is that it's weird that he objected to the idea that TI be conditional logic, because it makes perfectly good sense that INTPs and INTJs would generally score highest on IQ tests. And IQ tests comprise primarily either verbal reasoning kind of questions or TI questions, or they comprise TE questions, spatial recognition stuff, and especially TENI questions, like spatial pattern recognition. So, like, wouldn't it make sense then that those two skills correlate with those two functions? But ultimately they're different kinds of intelligence. So it's weird to compare INTJs and INTPs, because INTPs are like me, very talky, very ideationally and TI talky, and INTJs, well, the difference is INTPs and ENTPs both need to explain to understand, and need explanations to feel as though understanding can occur, whereas INTJs start with understanding and then either make the effort to explain what they think they understand or don't.
Okay, yeah, I like the or don't part, because yeah, often you don't really feel compelled to do so. um, yeah, a common thing I see is, yeah, there is always that intellectual part as far as the INTP and the INTJ, but I didn't. Whenever someone defines intuition, they say, "Oh, okay, well, you just kind of know things without actually going through the process of figuring them out." And I'm like, okay, that's true, but I always feel like they left out the creative aspect of it. Because to me, I'm like, all right, yeah, it's juxtaposing things. Like I can see that part clearly, but it's also got a really big creative, almost just energy to it, you know. And it's like I don't see that with the INTP, but I definitely see that when talking to you. When you were talking about how you went to bed and you would imagine yourself in the different stories, or when you were, you know, you made up the story on the fly about the palette on the wall, and I was like, yeah, I'm doing something like that all day, and yet I didn't make that connection as an INTJ thing because that's they never really mentioned that.
Well, the relationship between first and fifth is always a close one, and a person will, to an outside observer, appear to be good at both. The thing is this: it's like, because I'm an extroverted intuitor, I end up unconsciously using introverted intuition a lot. So what that means is, let's say I'm trying to write a song. I'm trying to find the complete song that it's supposed to be. In other words, I'm trying to find the NI hole. But I'm doing it from a brute force angle, which is to say, I'm trying lots of different things and waiting for me to recognize the right one. Okay? And the thing is, the right one is going to have exactly the right quality of familiarity, archetypal resonance, and divergence from familiarity, surprising newness. It's going to have exactly the right ratio of that. And for me, I try lots of shit, and my NI is good in the sense that I can recognize the correct one when I hear it. You know, I might not be able to remember it. I better be recording. You know. Or else and so I can go back and listen to it again. But I can recognize it when I do hear it. So the thing is, in that regard, to be a good extroverted intuitor requires me to be a good introverted intuitor, despite the fact that I'm never willfully applying my attention in that fashion. Concurrently, to be a good introverted intuitor requires that you be better, more intuitive, quote unquote, than people who have lower NI in the stack or whatever. Which means you need to account not just for the obvious intuitive conclusion, but for the most nuanced intuitive conclusion, which includes divergent elements. So if you're going to be... Now, it's not... Whereas my NI is mostly applied to art concerns, like what this song should be, or how long it should be, or how many... should it go another time around or something. Your NI is directed more towards the logic of systems. So it's like you can look at something with its own unique logic and have a new intuitive conclusion about it that nobody else has noticed before or something, or a very effective, correct, wow, that's a good idea solution about something, or perhaps strategy to attain something. And what makes it intuitively distinct is the fact that it has that same thing, the same ratio of newness and resonance. But the difference is you start there and then struggle to explain it all, whereas I start explaining and make my way towards understanding, whether it's by musical trial and error or words or whatever.
Interesting. So, question: when you speak, are you sort of figuring out what you're saying as you're speaking?
I mean, not usually. Usually, I have some sense of the gist of what I'm going to try to accomplish saying, and then I'm figuring out exactly how to express it as I'm talking.
Okay. Because my wife, I'm pretty sure, is a INFP, and she, like, I pretty much think it and then I speak it, and it's like she speaks and it's like she's figuring it out as it's coming out. Is very odd to me. But I know she has that second slot NE, and I was wondering if that's what's
Well,
like why out like that.
the reason she plays out differently than me is because she starts with the premise that she experiences things and realities are what they are,
Hmm.
and that she's trying to express those realities with more or less success. Whereas I start with the idea that ideas are what they are, and I know them, and I'm trying to explain them. So it's like for her, she starts with a feeling. You can only express a feeling so successfully in words because
Yeah.
they're high resolution experiential data, and we have labels for them, but it conveys very little of the information of the experience.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. So what do you do if you have a problem? If she has a problem like communicating that, like it's just often I find we bump heads when it comes to that, it seems like it's frustrating for her to try to explain, and she's having a difficult time with it.
Well, because if you're not agreeing with her, her her words are always going to say this. Okay, that I'm just not saying it well. You're just not getting what I mean. Okay, whereas which is expressive of the fact that she's beginning with the idea that she's trying to express something ineffable ultimately, and that getting you to grok with her, resonate with her sort of emotionally on why she feels that way is what her goal is. But her words make it sound like she's trying to get you to agree that her claim is correct.
Yes, yes, and which is where we tend to have problems. um,
Can you give me 1 second to refill my coffee?
sure, sure.
Stir, 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 stir. And there you go. Takes a lot of powdered creamer to make a good cup of coffee.
Agreed. um, yeah, I wouldn't think we would have uh issues because we both have the FI, and she's got a first slide and I've got a third. But man, it is difficult to communicate at times.
Well, part of the problem there is when there's a difficulty between the two of you, you're going to go to your sixth slot function because it means the world, the other person in the relationship, is pushing on you to produce something. And when pushed on to produce something, we tend to think that people are asking us to use our sixth slot function. For you, that's TI, okay? So it's going to be the exact opposite communicative style as the one she's using if there's a problem. When you're getting along fine, you're both using the same communicative style because everything that's happening and she's saying or whatever is aligned with what you feel like you want. And so there's no need to use words to parse out things at all. If the feelings don't align, then you shift to your sixth slot function. Because, normally you're just solving problems, attaining goals, or whatever with your tool function and knowing things and so forth. But when there's a challenge between the two of you, that pushes you to your third and sixth. Your third's not going to work because there's a challenge. That means you don't like it. So you go to your sixth, which means you use TI to parse out her FI bullshit, and there's nothing you can do. You just... Meanwhile, she's going to her sixth, which is NI, and then you're like, my irreducible truth. No, my irreducible truth. And so you go, well, let's parse them out. And she goes, you're just not getting what I mean.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Because I've come to that conclusion. Like, okay, it's like we're speaking two different languages, and it's so hard to get through that. And
Well, I mean, it might help for her as well to understand that this is a cognitive function thing in large part, and that, you know, by recognizing it for what it is, you can take a step back and go, all right, so here's what's happening right now. This may not resolve the problem, but we can describe what's happening, at least sort of independently of it actually happening. And what's happening is I'm using TI for my sixth slot to parse out your words for what words mean. And you're trying to say that our words should agree with your feelings. And so let's both start there by recognizing that's where the communicative gap is. And then I don't know if that resolves it or not, but at least you've met it up a bit or something.
yeah, I had forgotten until you mentioned it. We had kind of a similar way of coming to a understanding on that, where I would be like, okay, you're saying this, and I'm hearing this. Is that what you're saying? And it kind of pretty much slows down and allows both people to kind of see both sides. And I guess, you know, in a way that is somewhat similar to what you're saying. But yeah, it's it's frustrating at times.
It would drive me completely insane. I would just be yelling at her, words mean things.
I have said that on numerous occasions. Those exact words. Yeah. But they do mean things. That's how you express yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, for like an FI Dom, it's not exactly why they express themselves. They're not trying to make any point. They're not saying words because they're making claims that they want you to agree with. They're just sharing their experience usually.
What am I supposed to do with that?
You're supposed to go, oh, and now let's share my experience. Isn't this fun? Let's share each other's experiences.
I'm a problem solver. If you give me you come with me with a complaint or a problem, I'm gonna try to fix it. Like, that's just what I naturally do.
Oh,
If you just want to cry about the experience, there's nothing I can really do for you.
she wants you to commiserate. Let's practice. Let's practice, okay? Oh, Lawrence, it's so annoying, this thing that's happening at work. I'm so sad. And then you're supposed to go, oh my gosh, baby, I am so sorry to hear that. Okay, so you practice your part. Oh, Lawrence, I'm so sad. Now you practice your part.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
No, you have to do it like this. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry that happened to you.
Nobody who knows me would believe that.
Did she ever say to you this sentence? I was hoping we could spend some time together.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, INFPs, you guys are silly. I was hoping we could spend some time together. Why? Why were you hoping that?
I was wondering, do you get okay, this is what I think is happening. I don't know this is happening. I think I might be like, I sound like an asshole even saying this. I think I might be sort of intellectually intimidating certain people unintentionally. Do you get that? And if so, what do you do with that?
Well, I deal with it poorly. I definitely get that. But the thing is, I don't operate from a very NI perspective. In other words, I don't see myself very much as others might experience me. And so I'm I'm sort of always operating under a frame of reference where I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt and treating them kind of like colleagues and assuming they can understand me and carry on with me. Occasionally I'll get somebody like Yoshi Perspectives who reacts very badly to what I was saying in that video about TI. And but mostly what he was saying is, I don't understand you, and rather than questioning my own perception of myself as being a very smart guy, I'm going to accuse you of word salad, Eric. So then I responded to that by making a video saying this is all bullshit and going line by line and saying why it's all bullshit. Now it's non-responsive and what he's really saying in each of those sentences and so forth. That's not a good way to deal with it. I think a better way to deal with it is to try to have a clearer self-concept and to recognize that in reality, you know, most people are probably outliers on some angle because they represent 1/16 of the possible types. Now, that may be more than 1/16 of the population or less than 1/16 of the population. I think for INTJ, ENTP, it's substantially less. But regardless, they have their own specialty. So the thing is, we have to remember that for all types, when they're operating in their wheelhouse, other types aren't going to be able to keep up. And it's just a matter of some wheelhouses are more meaningfully engaged with the world than others. With NITE, you're universalist first. You know what's universally so first, and so that's a way of being that's engaged intellectually somewhat with the external world. Now the TE means you're engaged with more specific problems. In other words, you're not likely to go around explaining cognitive functions to people. You're more instead likely to use your knowledge of cognitive functions to solve some problem or attain some goal or it garner more understanding for yourself. In other words, it's not something that you're going to use to be a subject with particularly. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is that if we recall that most people specialties are not ours and that we're engaged in a communicative kind of thing, then I guess we'd tread more lightly or something. I don't know about you because FE Polar probably doesn't give a fuck.
Uh, it depends. Like if if it's within my circle, then I try to take that into consideration. Um, but if it's outside my circle, I don't care. But the problem is I'm not really aware of when I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing. Like, all right, I got yelled at the other day. My wife told me, she said, I'm not interested in having a philosophical conversation, a philosophical debate with you every day. She says, you're the outlier. You're the weirdo here. I'm the normal one. Most people are like me, and you have to adapt. And I'm like, okay, well, one, I'm not really aware of when I'm doing that because I'm not really purposely trying to do it. I'm just trying to engage in conversation. And secondly, I'm only going to adapt so much.
I mean, she's
I don't.
countervaluing
Yeah,
your nature.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like what a, you can't, if you're a lion, you can't not be a lion. If you're a cat, you can't not be a cat. You know, it just is what it is. It's like I'm willing to bend, but I can't not be what I am.
I mean, that sentence you just said right there is a kind of a nice way to nutshell NI in general. If you're a lion, you can't not be a lion. If you're a cat, you can't not be a cat, and it's just what it is. Think about species in general. That correlates kind of strongly with NI. Shape constancy, the idea that no matter what angle you look at something from, it's still the same thing, is about the identity of things outside of yourself. And to say that something has a clear identity means it's part of a distinct set. It's not. It's not undefined. Like to say that lion is Joe. That's Joe. He's a lion. Is to say that that's an individual in a set called lions, and thus we can constrain our understanding of what we might accurately say about Joe. So it's like from her perspective, probably all of that stuff is putting things unnecessarily in boxes. But basically, if that's what you're going to do as an NI person is understand what boxes things fit in and what, like, you know, as you see bits of a pattern emerging, you can kind of intuit, oh, this is an example of that kind of pattern or something. And so you're going to share your thoughts. 6-slot NI, countervalued NI, means it's gonna be like me dealing with my dad. Every time I deal with my dad, it's like, okay, what are we gonna talk about this time? And he comes in and goes, all right, son, do you have your calendar open? Because we're gonna need to talk about logistics. And I'm just like, okay, Dad.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's an accurate description of what it feels like.
I don't know if you can fix that really, but
Yeah.
I mean, at least if you understand it, then maybe she'd equate more her reaction to you on it. She'd modify it more with FI, like recognizing that it's who you are might make her treat it less as a countervalued way of attention and more as something that she values inherently or something. I don't really know how FI works, but
yeah, I'm trying to get a better understanding on it, but my conclusion is it works very differently for her than it does for me because of the slot placement.
I would say that an analogy I've made before, and I think is a good one for FI, is that it does have this quality of a large stone, that it gets warm slowly, heats up slowly by way of a bunch of good shared experiences, and then it cools down very slowly in the absence of good shared experiences, but it cools down quickly in the presence of shared bad experiences. And once it gets either cold or hot, it's hard to get it back to the other direction.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes sense. Thank you. That is very helpful.
Sure, right? I hadn't thought of that metaphor in a long time. I haven't used that metaphor in a long time.
It works very much for me, in my opinion.
And that's the other thing about being polar is like I seem to forget quickly things that I come up with that maybe help me understand FI better. I'm so basically not attuned to it that even my intellectual links to it are easily lost. It's weird.
I can see that. I mean, your mind just is like, yeah, this it's of least importance, you know.
So somebody suggested this test to me in an email, and I'd like to maybe see what you do with it. if you don't mind. It's kind of a fun idea. Maybe you saw me do it on a recent. If you watched a recent session, I did it. But can you define boat?
Boat, the craft that floats on the water.
Okay, can you define float?
To sit on top of a body of water.
Okay,
Or a body of liquid, I guess.
Can you define liquid?
A non-solid material?
State of matter.
Yes, thank you. Non-solid state of matter.
Okay, can you define state?
I want to say oneness of being, but that doesn't quite fit. No, not existence.
That's a tough.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with state of being.
State of being? State of being, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, existential state of being or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about like liquid, solid, gas, things go through state change. So, yeah, okay, interesting. The idea that the person posed was that as you ask those kind of questions, a person will get more abstract in their definitions, and that the theory was people with poor TE. The theory, the person or the hypothesis, the person who emailed me presented was that people with poor TE won't get past a certain level of abstraction. Whether that's actually the case, I don't know. But I thought it was an interesting idea to see how people deal with being asked to define increasingly more abstract terms.
When by the second question, I thought it was just NI. I mean, maybe my TE and NI are inseparable because it's 1 and 2, but I thought NI right off the rip. That seems more NI than TE to me.
Well,
TE,
I agree. It seems more N than
reverse.
I agree. It seems more
building
N.
on. Okay, yeah. Like N is subtracting, almost breaking it down, where TE might be feels more like building it up. I mean, I guess it can break it down depending on what you were talking about, but it doesn't feel like it would flow in that direction.
Well, I think the equivalent to conditionality for TE is ordinality. So it's like, whereas TI knows whether something is conditionally valid or not, TE knows not to go step 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh shit, I got to go back and do step 2. TE, it makes sure that the ordinals of things are accounted for. Because there's anything that you want to do or solve or consider or whatever may or may not be linked to ordinality. So if I give you a lesson on how to be cool, those steps don't necessarily have to go in a certain order. But if I give you a lesson on how to brush your teeth, those steps have to go in a certain order.
Right.
So TE deals with shit that has ordinality, and basically everything but language communication and other symbolic language interactions has its own logic, unique to itself. So you're dealing with things, a reality in which external things actually are identities in and of themselves that have their own logics, and the INTJ is about knowing the identity of external things and figuring out their logics. So they're really ideally suited to solve systems questions.
I would agree. Interesting enough, though, sometimes some of those solutions are really out there. And I'll give you an example. I was watching Rational Typology, and they were interviewing another INTJ there, and they was asking him something about his ideas of an idea to make the world better or something like that. And he was saying that, he believes that you should take away privacy, and that would result in nobody would really be doing anything underhanded because everybody could see what everybody was doing. And I expected Gabriel, the other INTJ, to push back on that, but he didn't. And I realized, like, okay, in theory, what you're saying would probably be accurate. It would probably get the result you would want, but who would want to give up their privacy? I wouldn't want to give up my privacy. I highly value my privacy. It's like it's like, yeah, I can get this going to get the result, but it's somehow they miss stuff in the middle sometimes, like just consideration of other factors. You can end up with some really out there concepts.
Well, it's called radical transparency, what you're talking about. And one of the pioneers of this idea was David Brin, who's one of my favorite authors. He's an INTP. It's interesting that this guy you're talking about, purportedly anyway, is an INTJ. And David Brin, I'm quite confident, is an INTP. Two introverts advocating for this radical transparency thing. Whereas if you were to ask them direct questions about their own personal privacy, they probably would try to defend that personal privacy regardless of their position on radical transparency. In contrast, I'm a proponent of radical transparency because I literally don't give a fuck about privacy at all. I don't have any privacy, basically. I don't want any privacy. The only things I keep private are some financial stuff, and basically, that's it. I mean, the specific details of my sex life, I guess I keep private. But even that, it's like, it depends on what kind of mood I'm in and to what kind of jokes I want to make, right? So I operate under the principles of radical transparency, which is to say, I do everything out in the open because my feeling is that if I'm doing something that's actually bad, then I should be seen doing it and shamed for it so that I'll stop and make amends for my wrongdoing. Or if I'm not doing something that's actually bad, then I should have no reason to hide it. But that's just me because I'm an extrovert, and I'm an extroverted intuitor and want to be all out there. I'm not trying to project that frame of reference on everybody else. I get that a lot of people don't operate like that, and that's totally okay.
I'm just shocked that the INTJ would say that, because I know. I've seen like conversations about this. INTJs are very private about their FI. Like, if you're gonna do something, you ask me, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, why do you want to do that? It's just curiosity. I'm super curious. But if I was gonna do something, you ask me, I might be like, none of your business, and it might not be me trying to hide something. It's just, why do you feel the need to encroach upon my privacy?
That's third slot FI right there. It's like, what I want to do is my personal thing, and I'm selfish with it, and you don't need to know anything about that, and that's it.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct.
Let me. Let me close this door here. I've got the gardeners coming. For spending so little time in my life, the gardeners managed to incur a substantial amount of my ire. It's like the worst couple of hours, or the worst, I guess it lasts about 30 minutes. The worst 30 minutes of the week is when the gardeners are here. I hate leaf blowers. I hate lawnmowers. I hate any gas-powered gardening implement.
Not a fan of gardening, huh?
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts, having been around cognitive functions for a few months now, about its role in informing humanity about humanity, and its current role as rejected pseudoscience, quote unquote?
I think it would be very beneficial if it was more publicly known, like more accepted, maybe taught in schools and whatnot. Because I mean, how can it be worse to help a person know more about themselves and how they work? I think of it more as a manual, like a car manual. Here's a car, and this guy might have the same exact car, but here's the way to do it, and here's the way for him to do it. And your use of the car may not be the same because your environment may not be the same, but it's good to know. And then you can also compare that against other cars, and it might be like, you may not be as good, you may not be as suited for this task. You might be better suited for another task, and vice versa when it comes to other people. So I think it would be very helpful for people. As far as the science aspect of it, I wish that could be locked down. I don't know what science would require us for that to get, legitimized, but that would be great because, like I said, I think it would just be overall helpful to humans, just people in general.
What are your thoughts on evolution?
Uh, I believe in evolution. I mean, that's pretty much my thoughts on it.
So you think that species explains speciation?
You said, could I explain it?
I said, do you think that evolution explains speciation?
I mean, I would have to go. I had to go all the way back and kind of like really look at it. It's been a long time I really looked at evolution, like way back in high school, but I don't know exactly how it all works out because I know that they say there are a lot of distant relatives as far as like reptiles and whatnot. But I mean, I don't see a better explanation. So until that comes, I'm going to stick with evolution.
That's a sensible enough perspective that if you feel as though there's no preferable alternative as an explanation. I don't think evolution actually explains anything, but that's fine. Oh. I was just curious if you had any thoughts on it. What about
nah, particularly.
What about the singularity? Do you have any thoughts about that?
The singularity?
Yeah.
What's the singularity?
Well, some people posit that there's going to come a moment where artificial intelligence becomes more capable of making itself smarter, and at that point becomes the master race, so to speak, because humans only have a limited capacity to make themselves smarter, and presumably this AI would have a more or less unlimited capacity to make itself smarter.
Well, I think I've heard talk of something similar. I think you.
Sorry, I'm just gonna send them. There, I sent them a text saying I'm busy.
I think Elon Musk was saying something about that on the Joe Rogan podcast last year or something. And I mean, I don't know enough about it, but I mean, I am concerned in the way that if that could potentially happen, that might be problems for the human race. But at the same time, I don't really. If you can make yourself, if the AI can make itself smarter, I don't think it would be able to have all the nuances of a human, which may be an inherent flaw should we have to do battle, I guess. But I don't really know. Like, I don't think I know enough about the subject to give you a decent answer one way or the other.
Hmm. What kind of stuff do you normally like read about or watch videos about, or I guess you've probably been on a cognitive function kick lately.
Yeah, lately I've been on that, but I don't know. Like I read a good amount of fantasy novels, art books related to my craft, random just books of interest.
What's your craft?
Oh, I'm on oil.
Oil. Oh yeah, oil paint.
Yeah.
What do they tell you, those books?
It's usually about techniques. There are vastly different approaches, techniques, and different things you gotta learn as far as like perspective, color theory, and stuff like that. If you want a certain technique applied to your painting, I mean, technically, you don't need to only have some paints, some brushes, and just put whatever you want on the canvas. So,
Have you ever watched Painting for Intuitives? I think it's called the video with.
no.
I had a guest Spanish painter named Raul Diego come on to the channel and do a couple of videos with painting instructions for people. So you might want to check that out. I'll share the link with you at the end of the conversation here. You probably pick up a lot of technique from Raul Diego because you see, he doesn't paint with his eyes or his hands. He paints with his ideas. I don't know.
I've never seen an idea pick up.
Because he's an intuitive, you see, so he paints with his ideas. He's a genius.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, so what kind of stuff when your wife says you get into a philosophical debate with her? What kind of stuff is she talking about usually?
I don't know. Because I'm not, like I said, I'm not really fully aware of it. It may be, we might be discussing something that happened at work, because we both work at the same place, but we work in different departments, and then it's like a different, I disagree on like policies and whatnot, or I don't know, just general ideas.
What kind of policy would make you voice like this policy is bad?
Can't think of anything in particular. Oh, okay. All right. So there's a policy that says that if the person calls off on the next shift, the least seniority member will have to stay to fill in that person's slot. I don't care for that policy. I feel like it's invading on my private life. Like I want to give you my 8 hours, and I'll do my job to the best of my ability for that 8 hours. But after that, I want to go home. I don't care what happens after that. If the guy called off or whatever, that's on you to fix that. That doesn't have anything to do with me. My wife works in management, so we're going to have different perspectives on those kind of things.
You just don't get it, Lawrence. You don't understand how difficult it is. We have to have somebody there, and there has to be some policy, and it seems to be like the most fair.
Oh, I did want to tell you, I want to say either last night or this morning, I saw a video, and I don't know if it was a new video. I think it was a new video, but I'm not sure because I've been watching a lot of your videos where you were discussing something, but you mentioned that you thought that cognitive functions, that you were born with your cognitive functions. I agree. And I agree because my daughter was born prematurely, and it was like an emergency C-section thing. But the next day when I went to go see her, I saw her before my wife, and they were taking her. They had to put her in this contraction. I forget what it's called, but it's basically to keep her healthy and going and everything because she's not in the womb developing naturally. When they took her out, she had this. It was like at this exact moment I knew 100%. I mean, not that I doubt it, but at 100%, how you just, that is my child right there. They took her out and they're lifting her up, and she like, she had this look of just, okay, what's going on here? Like, it was like just a look of intelligence. It was just like no child should have. She looked, and it's just sort of like, I'm not crying, I'm not doing any of that. I'm observing, and trying to figure out what is going on. And I just like, I knew, like, I recognized that look. I had that look many times, and I was just like, yep, all right, yeah, I think you're born with your personality.
She was born a knower, is what you're saying.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting because my daughter was born an action type. Came out crying, and also was, but most tellingly, she was born with ignoring SI, and what that meant was she wouldn't go pee. We couldn't leave the hospital and go home until she would pee, but she wouldn't go pee until a new nurse came on shift and ran warm water over her leg, and then finally she peed a whole bunch.
Huh.
Now if that's not telling you something about SI, I mean, it's like, so okay, ignoring SI makes sense because ultimately what it means is she has trouble using SI as a subject because the conscious function, the dominant function, is a subject function, and she's mostly, therefore, a subject as a person rather than an object or an agent. You're mostly an agent as a person. And as a consequence, it means that her ability to consciously attend to SE compromises her ability to pay attention via SI, and that explains why she didn't go pee until the nurse stimulated it with external stimuli, namely warm water.
Yeah. I I had a conversation with a cousin of mine, say 20 years ago, and I was telling him I told him my theory on like how I thought, and I know nothing about the brain development. Like, let me say it off rip because I know there's some neuroscience going like, dude, that's not how all at all how it works. But I was explaining to him, I was like, I think that you are born with how your brain's going to work. Sort of like how you're born with your physical features of your parents. I was like, it's probably a combination of both your parents, and maybe one's more dominant than the other, or maybe it kind of meets in the middle, but it's going to be something like that. And I remember it because he just looked at me weird. He was like, all right, I don't know why you thought of that, but all right. And he was like, that sounds good, but he was like, I'll believe it when it comes from a doctor. It's like you don't have the credentials for me to even get at any thought. But yeah, I
Well,
think
you bring up an interesting point, which is that nobody disputes the fact that people are born with certain physical destinies, right? Like
yes.
the doctor said when I was born that I was the longest baby in 2 weeks or something like that. And they predicted early on in childhood that I'd grow to be 6'2", 6'3", something like that, and I'm 6'4". So it's like nobody thinks, oh, you can't tell how tall someone's going to be by their child size. It's not 100%, but most people agree that barring malnutrition or some other mitigating factor, that your height, for example, is sort of predestined, right?
Hmm.
And everybody agrees that your right-handedness is sort of, I'm not sure if people agree with this or not, actually. People think that you become right-handed, or people think you're born that way. But to me, it seems like it's either born that way or really early on, right?
Right. Yeah, I definitely go with born that way. I mean, I know I've had a issue as far back as I can recall with just like I've never been one to go along with, okay, here, look, just do this because we said do it. Like that never worked for me. Like, and I remember that in school, just like I was like, well, why do we have to do it like this? Doesn't make sense. And they're like, no, well, you got to do it like this, and that's that. And they always took it as a challenge to their authority. And
And
I had the same issue with my mom. Like I've always had that, and people would tell me, well, you have problems with authority. And I'm like, I
No,
really?
they're trying to remove your capacity to use your tool function to deal with the world. They're saying, don't use your tool function. I will provide the how to you. And but you're like, but that's my tool function. What the fuck?
Yeah, but I was like that in elementary school. Like I was like that as far back as I can remember. So if you're not born with it, how do you explain that? Like my oldest memory is of me as like 5, and I look at my daughter, and I watch her fool like grown adults, and I'm like, all right, you guys really shouldn't be getting fooled by a 3-year-old, but I'm like, it is what it is.
Right.
So yeah, I'm under the impression you're just born with your personality, your cognitive functions. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and I like the example I gave in that video about me saying this program is not appropriate for little boys. I mean,
Yeah,
the thing is, that's clearly an FE frame of reference. It's not an FI frame of reference. And I was obviously verbose as a little kid. I talked a lot and used big words for a little kid, even back then. And in fact, I have a video on the channel of me at 17 years old being interviewed by my high school TV news station called Apache News. And they asked all the students about this new law that was passed that required basically high school parties to tell the cops before they were going to have a party.
yeah, that's gonna happen.
And so, and what I say in the video, it's so clear that I'm still exactly the same guy I was when I was 17 years old. I say, well, I think that it violates the right to assembly as guaranteed by the First Amendment, because that guarantees the right to peaceful assembly, and since most parties are peaceful and don't result in people getting injured or something, then it's unconstitutional and therefore shouldn't stand. Which is exactly what I'd say today.
I'm sure they wasn't expecting that from a 7-year-old.
Well, the other answers were all terrible. But that was back in the day. That's like, we're talking late 80s, and it was crazily unsupervised teenagers with cars and no cell phones and no internet, and just this kind of like, they're gonna do what they do kind of thing by the adults. It was a different time for sure, and like the shit that like they'd have like all. I'd drive me and a bunch of my teammates in my car at like 16 to debate tournaments that were far away and back again, and nobody ever said anything or blinked an eye.
Yeah, the 80s were a different time, man. I personally think they were just awesome, but the kids born after that, they will never know. The freedom. It was just an age of freedom and responsibility. But yeah, it was awesome.
Same thing was true in the 70s as a kid. It's like there's no such thing as helmets. It's like, what? Helmets? Helmets were for retarded people. That's the only thing that you knew about helmets was occasionally you'd see in public a retarded person who had a helmet on. And so, of course, the only people who wore helmets were daredevils, jumping motorcycles, and mentally handicapped people. Of course, eventually, people realized, hey, if I'm going to be riding my skateboard down this big hill, maybe a helmet's not such a bad idea.
Yeah. You're like, you know what? Let's reconsider the helmet thing.
Yeah.
I noticed we're getting close. I know you said you got another appointment. It was a couple other things I wanted to go over before we end. You said there are 2 kinds of INTJs, audio and visual. Why does that break down like that? Is that for every type, or it just happens to be INTJs?
I probably did say that. It's probably an older video. What I'm saying there basically is I've noticed that INTJs tend towards either a visual form of expression or an auditory form of expression. Now, I don't think that makes them subtypes or whatever, but some INTJs are sound engineers. You're an oil painter, right? So it's like that tends to be the case with INTJs. They'll fall into one of those kind of categories like that. That's just an observation. I don't know exactly why. And any statement I made about it linking to visual or auditory processing was speculative, and I retracted it. I shouldn't have said it.
Oh, okay. All right, I wasn't expecting that. um. Also, I was wondering. I don't know if this is an intuitive thing or not, but I was just curious if you could relate to this. Okay, sometimes I'm talking to a person, and you're just talking face to face, and your consciousness is focused on just being in your body talking to them, and then that person could say something or do something, and it's just stay with me, okay? It's like another you in your head. Like you're still talking, but there's another you in your head. Like, well, that's interesting. Why would you do that? So you're simultaneously doing two things at the same time. All right. And now this one is even more rare, but it does happen from time to time where there's a third me overhead that's observing the first two me's and having a third like consciousness going on. Can you relate to that? Do you know what that is? I mean, I figure it's intuitive.
Not really, and here's why. Because for me, they happen successively. I'll like I'll have a moment where I'm driving along and thinking, where am I going again? And try to remember back where I was going when I left the house to figure out where I'm going. And then this is an SI thing. Then I realized I have a Post-it note on my dashboard that tells me where I'm going that I could have just looked at, right? And then I think, oh, this is an interesting event relating to SI, NI, SE. And so what it means to be an SI person is when trying to remember where you're going, you're not looking externally where the Post-it note is. You're looking internally and going back in your memory to when you left the house to try to figure out where you're going. So anyway, the thing is, those things happen sequentially for me. They don't happen concurrently. Now, it is true that when you're talking, I'm concurrently thinking like sort of aborted branches as you're going along. You say meow meow meow. I go, begin to speculate, but then stop because then you say the next sentence. So I'm now attending to that one. Start to speculate, then you. So it's like I'm listening, ideating, like that. It's off and on. It's not concurrent. I do know what you're talking about from a semi-dream state. So sometimes when I start to fall asleep, I can hear songs or music that I can hear the whole thing playing, and I can concurrently isolate each of the parts and listen to them separately, all in my head. I can't do it when I'm awake, but I can do it in this semi-dream state, and then I'm observing myself doing that. And going, wow, that's neat that I can do that, that this is happening. And so that's the only example I can come up with for what it sounds like you're talking about.
Okay. All right. So you think that's just I
think you're describing an NI thing, and I'm NI ignoring.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, it's just an NI thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to explain to somebody, and they just looked at me like, what? It was like, all right, I get it. Because I was talking to my wife, and she asked me a question about when could our daughter date, and I told her like, at 16, we'll discuss it. We revisit at 16, I'm not making any promises, but we'll revisit it.
Uh-huh.
And she continued forward, like, oh, well, you know, people are dating now at like 10 or 11.
Oh,
And then I'm like, no. Like, this one was unusual because usually when I split myself apart, it's like I'm still both parties, and this one felt like I was still both parties, but one party was definitely different than the other. Where I'm now in my head like, okay, no, I'm I'm talking and I'm getting upset. Like I can hear me raising my voice, um, and I can feel my body reacting and just emotional, which is like unusual for me. And my body is like, no, I'm not doing that. You know, at 16 we'll talk about it. But the other me in my head was like, okay, this makes no sense. This is illogical. Our daughter is 3, so why are we even getting upset about this? But clearly the body me was like getting more and more upset. Where the conscious me in the head was kind of like, okay, dude, you should probably calm down. But it felt like there were two distinct me's at that point. That's never happened before.
well, you know what's funny is how parents of young daughters think it's going to be up to them.
I know, I know. I am 100% aware of that, but it gives me comfort to think so.
Yeah. When
It's
my
like,
daughter was 14, she was a full blown woman. Like, she was stacked. And when she entered high school, she came from a middle school out of district. She was at this private middle school I was teaching at. Started high school. It was just like, she immediately got a lot of attention. So, it's like, I could only fight that reality so long before you just
yeah,
go, well, put her on birth control. Yeah. So that's
I,
one of the advantages of being FI polar, I guess, too, is that she was so like certain about telling me basically, look, I know what I'm doing. I'm not interested really in your input here. I feel quite comfortable and confident that I know what I want and stuff. And she was an ESTP, of course, so what do you expect? But at that point, you just go, okay. My ESFJ wife tries to play, keep the door open and your feet on the ground. Like, you're going to prevent teenagers from having sex. It's insane.
yeah, yeah. Um. Oh, I was also wondering. I was talking to an INTJ, and it was interesting. We both described TE the same way. Like when we gotta use it, it feels like you're taking your sword out of its sheath and like using it and then putting it back in. And I was curious, like, is that also how you see your
Yeah,
TI?
yeah, it's a tool function for sure. That's a great analogy for a tool function because it totally is that. It's like, okay, here I got. Now it's time to. This bullshit needs to be properly dispatched, and out comes the TI, and I just parsed it to shit. So,
Okay.
so yeah, that is how you feel when circumstances are well set up for you to use your tool function. You feel like, here we go.
Yep. Yep. That is. Yep. Yep. It's like, yeah, I see that. It's all lined up. We're just gonna cut this in half real quick.
All right, so I have to draw this one to a close.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop recording now,